Hey, you guys, come here. No, come a little closer. I have a secret. I am a terrible composter, and I think you should be one too. Seriously, I'm a terrible composter. But look at this beautiful compost that I made. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm a very well-intentioned composter. I'm just not a very attentive composter. And in this case, intention does not equal attention to my compost pile. What I mean by this is that while I understand the basics of composting, and I do follow those very, very, very basic general rules that make compost happen, I don't do a lot of the things you're supposed to do with compost. For instance, I didn't turn my pile for a year. I have a 2-bin system, and the way I use it is definitely not a system. My point here is this. You can make this beautiful compost basically with the minimum amount of possible effort you could ever muster. And that requires mostly throwing stuff in a pile. Welcome to my composting area. This is way better than it normally looks. This bin is more indicative of what it looks like, generally speaking. But I spent the whole weekend working on compost. So now this bin looks, quite reasonable. Perhaps the way you might expect a compost pile to look. You probably know the basics of composting. You need water, you need air, you need greens and browns. Greens are things like this, green things that are plant material, grass clippings, things like that. Browns are things like these great leaves. Everything you do beyond that, it's kind of extra, and it's going to help you get compost much faster. But I assure you, compost happens. So it's fall, and right now is the perfect time to be building a compost pile because composting material is all around us. We are pulling things out of our garden that are great greens. The brown material is falling from the sky. There are leaves everywhere. So you have everything you need right now at this time of year, which is why I spent some time recently cleaning out one of those bins, and we're going to work on the second one. But we're adding something kind of different this year. But before we get to that, let me tell you what I found when I got in there. So this weekend, what I did was I took all the basically fresh plant material that I've been throwing there, put it in the other bin, and got down to sort of bare, starting to rot material, got rid of the bigger chunks there. And what I found at the bottom was gardener's gold. The reason we go through all this, tons of beautiful finished compost. Maybe not tons, but judging by my wheelbarrow, which is a 1/4 yard wheelbarrow, I think I had about 1.25 yards of finished compost. So I was able to add compost to most of my vegetable beds, including along the sides where I really need to get some organic matter in there. I composted around some newly planted shrubs, and that's just one bin. I'm hoping I find about that much in the second bin once I get to that. So I'm telling you this because I want to encourage you to start composting if you're not already, because you don't need to do all the extra steps. You guys, I didn't even turn that thing. It just happened. Now, I'm not advocating that this is the way you should compost. I'm just telling you that if you get busy and you don't think about it, it's still going to make compost. And that's exactly what happens to me. Like right now, I'm really into compost because I'm all excited that I got this new bunch. It's a great time of year to get a new pile going. I'm going to tell you right now, I know in the middle of next summer, I will not be turning the compost because I know myself well enough to know that my intentions do not always become attention. So do it now. Start a compost pile now. Now let me show you what's going on there and what we're adding to it. So this is the bin that I emptied out basically as much of the finished compost as was in here. And then what I did is I went in and I added back in a lot of the green material that I had temporarily moved into this bin. And then we mowed the lawn yesterday and chopped up all these leaves and threw a whole bunch of chopped up leaves inside here. We bagged these and chopped them up. Now these are even better than plain chopped up leaves because since we cut the grass with them, there's also grass clippings in there. So just those things alone can make compost. Now the next thing to do here will be to water this. Since I'm actually paying attention to this, I will water this pile a little bit, get some moisture in here. But let me show you what we're adding because this was kind of an experiment this year. So Proven Winners was nice enough to send me some annuals for a couple of projects in my garden this year. And everything they sent me came in these compostable pots. This is a new product for them. And they are selling these to garden centers who would like to use these. But this is plantable and compostable, which as far as I'm concerned is revolutionary. How many times have so many of us been just uncomfortable with the amount of plastic that is involved in gardening. And this is a great step in the right direction. Now, the way these pots work is that you can pull these tabs off here and then you can plant them. Let me show you what happened when I did that. So I planted a whole bunch of lobularia in front of the Belgian fence in the garden. And on one side, I planted them in the pots, ripped the tabs off and stuck the pots in the ground. And on the other side, I took them out of the pots. So far, I've only pulled the ones that were planted pots. And here's been my experience with that. So the first thing that happened is I lost a lot of the ones in pots. Not a lot, but maybe 30% of the ones that I planted in pots, I lost. What I learned is that when they're just getting going, if you don't have drip irrigation that goes directly into the top of the pot, they don't have any way to get water because most of their root volume is not surrounded by soil. It's just these little bits at the side. And then this is what it looked like when I pulled it out. So it looks a lot like a plant that was stuck in there. You can see the roots didn't go much beyond it. Now they grew fine once they got going. The ones that remained in the pots, once they got going, they did fine. Now here's one that I obviously just pulled out of the ground that was not grown in a pot. And to be honest, let's be honest, there's not a lot more root ball there. These annuals just don't spread that much, although look at the size of this thing. It was absolutely huge. This lobularia is a really good one. So maybe it doesn't make that much of a difference in terms of the roots, but in terms of getting them established and getting them started, for me, it's kind of a no-go. So I wouldn't do this again. If you have drip irrigation that goes right into the top of the pot, then I think it's a great idea. But I don't really care about the planting in the pot thing. That's not something I'd probably do in most cases anyway. What I care about is that I can throw this into my compost. Now, I've saved a whole bunch of these because the compost pile was in such a bad state in spring that I never put any in, but I have a large quantity of these things. Now, I'm not gonna throw them in there in one piece. I mean, this is 4 months in the garden and there isn't a sign of this breaking down in any way. So like most things when it comes to compost, smaller makes things go faster. So the smaller you can get pieces of whatever you're putting in your compost, the faster it breaks down, right? So since I've got a nice fresh compost situation here and I'm, for the time being a better composter, I'm just gonna break these up and put these in this compost pile. I'm not gonna get worried about how the size of the pieces. I'm just going in there. Now there is like a label-y thing on here. This is also made out of, I think like plant starches. So it all breaks down. The whole thing can go straight into the compost. Now when you read the information, and there is a QR code here, when you read more information about these pots, it will say that they need a sort of high temperature thing. I mean, they're very compostable in industrial composting facilities, but things will break down no matter how hot your pile is eventually. So we're gonna put these in here and we're just gonna watch these. We're gonna see how long does it take for these to break down in what I would call a very average home compost situation. So one thing that is not compostable are these plant tags. Given that I have a whole bucket down here that is reserved just for all the plant tags I find in my compost, I would say it would be a great improvement if we could get these to be compostable. Now I understand the problems why you can't make a tag compostable. That's because you're supposed to put your plant tags in your garden, and we have enough problems with our plant tags without them just disintegrating in front of us. However, I would add, how many people have had a plant tag actually stay somewhere for longer than it would take to actually break down? I don't know about you, but mine tend to end up in my compost pile.